So if we can quickly bring up the survey results, since I know we're all desperate to hear what everybody had to say. Um, so how far along are insurers in their digital transformation? About half the people are saying that they're getting there, which I think is great. There's still 16% that are thinking about it. I guess that's not surprising. So you always have, a bell curve of people who are getting there, but it sounds like more are thinking about it today than probably were even 12, 18 months ago. Encouraging to see 27% are full steam ahead. And I'd love to know who the 4% are who have a mature industrialized engine, because I swear to you, we can learn from that too, right, Sanjay? Okay, can we share the next one? There we go. So the top two transformational priorities for insurers: data management and analytics. Sanjay, that sounds like it's in line with what you were talking about. Cloud, Jonathan, that's interesting. It's only about 15%. There's still people who are ripping and replacing legacy systems. I suspect that will always continue to happen. RPA, about 36%. Process with cognitive computing, AI, ML, etc., about 24, and then 30% experience journeys. So it sounds like data management and analytics, which is not surprising because in insurance, that's probably always going to be one of the biggest priorities. So, interesting results. So, Sanjay, let me actually ask you, since you see stuff across the industry, do these answers and priorities reflect what you're seeing in other industries? I keep hearing that COVID has accelerated digital transformation, 2 years worth of work in 2 months and all of that stuff. But what are you seeing? What are you hearing outside of the insurance industry?
I'll give you two views. I'll tell you what I'm seeing outside the industry that is very consistent, and then I'll tell you some of the challenges we're also seeing as we all take this on. So clearly, I think this idea of business change is coming through in pretty much every industry. When you look at health, we've gone from 3 to 6% of at least US medical offices having telehealth as a capability. Now we're 9 to 100%. And of course, we're going to get to the pandemic, and we're not going to stay at 100%, we'll drop down. But that pendulum has shifted significantly. We go to stores, in-store retail has changed from promotions and aisleways to online ordering and curbside pickup. And that's the business model. And think about the changes that are implied across all of the different dimensions to make something like that happen. Consumer product goods have gone from distribution to, a lot of direct to consumer work. So across these industries, we're seeing the real reimagination of the business value that's being delivered in the new normal. And on the back of that, the technology trends that are driving that are very consistent. Data and analytics is super critical, particularly to the notion of experience, because I want to be treated as a market of one. And to do that, you need to understand who I am, how I behave, what I want, what I expect. That's a really important part. And we see that consistently. And so I would say, in answer to your question, Sasha, this is very consistent across industries that we're working with. I'll also, maybe if you'll allow me, just comment a little bit on, look, this is all great news. We're seeing so much digital transformation, and we're advancing by leaps and bounds, and fantastic story. But it's very hard and it's very complex because it's in the core. It's not about adding a channel. It's not about putting a website up. It's not about the previous versions of digitization. This is actually transforming the core. And one of the things I think we struggle with as an industry and across industries is the notion that really to impact change, to drive business results, you need 4 different assets in a corporation to come together. It's the people. So it's not digital, it's the people. It's the processes. It's the technology or digital, and it's the data. And those 4 are almost 4 asset classes. And if you're not thinking about people and driving change and the evolution of how you're digitizing, you're not quite there. If you're not thinking about this notion of processes, start with the target operating model, start with the end value proposition and design back from there. And then fit digital tooling, toolkits to enable that, as opposed to the other way around. Then you've kind of got it wrong. If you're not thinking about data as a fundamental asset, the book of business over the years, and lighting up dark data and being able to extract meaningful, valuable insights from that and repurposing them to how you deliver incredible value to clients, you're sort of missing a piece. And then, of course, the 4th piece is digital. Of course, there's all this technology and capability. And the previous table showed a lot of the ones that I think we're all thinking through. But I think one of the things we've learned is that unless you get a purposeful, synchronized execution of those 4 dimensions, just doing one of those four legs doesn't really get you there. And that's, I think, been a learning, I think, this time around as we've gone through it. And I find that companies, corporations, institutions that are actually thinking about this more fully, more holistically, and thinking about all four dimensions are definitely moving forward much faster than others.
So just a quick follow on. If you had to pick one industry that you think is getting this right, and you don't have to say insurance, I'd love to know what your views are.
Look, I think this is a very controversial and a topical question, and so I don't want to be kicked out of this forum. But I will say that some industries are perhaps a little bit more advantaged because they started with born in the cloud. They started with data that was already pre-digitized, right? And so clearly the born in the cloud companies, the fast growth tech, are reaping the benefits of that because they're able to pivot their business models. And you hear about social media companies getting to banking and all this other stuff that's going on. But I think they had a fast start. I think the real work that we're seeing come through is actually mainstream corporations that have existed for many, many, many years. They have an incredible book of business. They have an unbelievable insights on the value chain and the delivery mechanism. And the challenge and the opportunity is harvesting that, peeling it back, pulling it out, and putting that into play. So I'd say some have had a fast start or an easier foundation to build from, and some have an amazing wealth of opportunities that I think is still yet to be leveraged. And so that's probably the way I answer your question.
He's a diplomat. He should have been a politician, clearly, because he didn't give me an answer. I don't know if you noticed. So, Julie, just shifting to you, insurance is clearly not known to be an early adopter of new technologies. So I'd love to get your views. And you talked a little bit about the various things that the industry is doing. You talked about Chubb, which has been at the forefront of intelligent automation, and your digital first approach. But, what happened behind the scenes before you got to some of what we're seeing? Some of the work with Chubb Studios, some of, the new launches that you've done. I'd love to get your thinking maybe a couple of years ahead, and also have your priorities changed in the last 8-9 months significantly, and if so, how?
Yeah, so I'll start with sort of the journey we've been on. And, I would start with the journey is not for the faint of heart. So there's a very disciplined approach to that transformation. And again, I think Sanjay said it very well around the tenets of it's not just the technology, it's the processes, it's the people, it's what is the business going to look like when we leave behind. And then what I would actually add to that is a very disciplined approach to measurement on progress. There's been a lot of folks that have started this journey, particularly with the early on RPA adopters and some of the early on technologies that have not been able to see the cost save advantages, or have not been able to actually see the effectiveness advantages because they haven't been able to, get the end-to-end impact. So I think that's been a big learning for us. We've learned, from others outside of the insurance industry. We're very curious where others had started the journey before us, and took that approach. Very early on, that we weren't going to put technology in that was going to either cost us more than the current state, or wasn't going to be optimized across an enterprise approach. So I would say that's been a learning. I think as we talk about priorities, the priorities constantly change related to where the businesses have opportunities to move. So when we think about our approach to how we offer the digital capabilities, they have to be built and owned in such a way that we can easily extend them to a new product, a new process, a new opportunity, a new business. So I think that is something that we focus on pretty heavily. And I'll leave you with one last thought on our journey. This is digital transformation at Chubb is an enterprise priority sponsored by all of us who sit around the executive table. So trying to do this level of transformation across a large company or a large enterprise does require that there is an alignment across the businesses on why we're taking the journey and how we're going to approach it. So, sort of as an ambassador to that journey, it's really making sure that there's the visibility and communication around where it's appropriate and where it's not to take the movement.
Okay, and just a quick follow on, which is around the priorities. Do you believe that it's shifted significantly in the last 8-9 months, or do you believe you were already on the journey and you've kind of stayed the course?
I think we had a pretty good sense of where the opportunities were, particularly from an effectiveness efficiency perspective. We knew where we were scaled. We knew where we had businesses or regions that needed to be scaled, or, the processes needed to be cultivated before we started a more formal digitization journey. So that roadmap has not changed a lot. I think the demand, that's what's happened in the last 10 to 12 months, really the last 8 to 10 months. The demand for the capabilities has accelerated significantly in terms of businesses who now need those capabilities, who may have felt they weren't quite ready for the capabilities pre kind of the pandemic situation, and then digital adoption by consumers and distributors has increased. So that's, as we measure that digital adoption, we're very focused on making sure that that's the digital adoption sort of behavior that sustains us for the future.
Jonathan, flipping to you, I know when we were preparing, I was asking you all these technology questions and you kept bringing me back to customer first. What is the problem they're trying to solve? And that was quite interesting coming from a technologist. So I ask you, what are the biggest questions that customers are actually trying to solve in the insurance space? And then linked to that, what are some of the technology investments that they're making?
So I'm going to ground this a little bit in things that Julie and Sanjay said, right? We are focused on business outcomes. And Sanjay had said, and so did Julie, that technology is an enabler. So what are those technology investments that enable these business outcomes? And what are those business outcomes, right? It's improved claims, improved underwriting, differentiated customer experience, improved risk modeling. And what are the technologies that drive this, right? So I think of things like cloud and the accelerated adoption that we've seen in the last 9 months. Everybody said analytics and AI, cognitive, the RPAs, the bots. It's about enabling our workforce, right, to collaborate and to work remotely. But then in a post-COVID world, how do we create those differentiated customer experiences when we can't be in front of our customers, when we can't provide that white glove service face-to-face? How do you do it remotely, right? And then, it's about lowering the cost of operations and improving processes related to claims and underwriting. And then when you think about reducing the cost of claims and better identification of fraud, it's all about analytics and AI.
Interesting. And, we're going to talk about cloud a little bit more, but was that surprising to you, by the way? 13% focused on the cloud. That seems different from what I have been seeing, the conversations I've been having.
Well, I think a lot of customers have probably already started their transition towards the cloud. Most of my customers are already engaged in working through the cloud resources, using it to improve operational efficiency, to improve claims, improve underwriting, to better understand the data that we have. And by taking advantage of cloud services, right, you're in a position to get greater insight out of the data and make better decisions.
Fair enough. So I'm going to shift a little bit to something that I have been seeing in the space, and I'd love to get, Sanjay, yours and Julie's view. And this is a little bit about what you said, Sanjay, on about the born in the cloud, the digital native organizations. And it brings me to this view that partnerships are becoming more and more important. So, Julie, if you think of your digital first agenda, if you think about your latest relationship on a completely digital life insurance product with Nubank, in South America, how are you thinking about leveraging some of these new capabilities that are getting created, these new organizations, which could potentially be competitors to you in some space. But I see more and more partnering happen. So I'd love to get your views specific to insurance. And Sanjay, I'd love to get your views more broadly, because it's clearly a trend that's happening.
Sure. And, what I would say is some of that is very, as we think about our multinational footprint is very regional in Asia and Latin America in terms of how we have opportunities to distribute products and access customers. But the most important thing for us is we think about that. We behave in those businesses more like a digital native. So when we talk about Chubb Studio, it is a cloud native. It is a fully we can implement those technologies very easily with any type of partnership, and we do think about them in terms of how we augment the ultimate experience of their customers. So back to the conversation around, we just don't sell insurance products on, some third party, relationship website. It is how do we integrate and make sure that our technologies and capabilities position us to integrate into that customer experience so that it augments the value for the partnership as well as the value for us. We have interesting relationships that are public. We have a relationship with Grab in Asia. We have a lot of bank relationships. Obviously, DBS is one of the largest banks in Asia, well known as a digital leader. So we learn through those relationships more and more about how you embed yourself into other types of ecosystems, which will become in certain parts of the world really how certain types of products are sold. The other thing I would say about that, though, is then we take what we learn from those opportunities into our more traditional, distributed businesses. And so how do we take a personal lines customer who has a lot of needs for risk services and wrapper our product with other people's services into our ecosystem?
Sanjay?
I completely relate to what Julie, and I think Julie said really well. I think if I just expand that a little bit across industries, I think you'll see something very similar come through. And I think the key to unlocking that is not necessarily starting with what is it that we have to offer, but actually reversing the question and see what does the customer, what does the consumer actually want. I'll give you a simple example. We just relocated, so we're in the process of setting up an audio system in the house, audio and video system. But no longer am I out in the market buying a nice set of speakers. I'm buying something that is a speaker system that is Wi-Fi connected, that can play music in any room, that has machine learning in it, that allows it to sort of between the hours of 6 to 8, when I'm most open to kind of considering new genres, actually machine learn and suggest new suggestions, that allows me to go from room to room and based on geolocation, figure out where I am and play the music in that room. That allows me to buy music, buy songs. And now we're getting to the point where our kids are starting to get into this, buy the drum beat, buy a micro component and compose that with their own voice or their own instruments and put something together. And so you think about it, that's the customer, that's the consumer experience that someone wants to get, at least in this case, in my case, in the music area. And if you're a speaker manufacturer, if you're a media distributor, right? Those business models have to evolve to deliver this new customer experience. And I think that's fundamentally what's going on. I think customers are waking up and saying, I'm doing this moment. In this moment, this is the integrated offering I need. And some of them will come from us, but much of that has to come from the ecosystem. And so going back to your question, all over again, I think this ability to harvest the best of the ecosystem, this ability to build on the shoulders of others, this ability to think comprehensively as to the value that a client actually needs and to compose that overall offering, obviously with our components at the center of it, but actually components from our ecosystem of partners and perhaps even competitors in a way that adds and drives differential value to a client. I think that's the key to the game. That's how sort of the progressive companies are moving forward. And I think we're seeing the world change as a result of that.
Interesting. So, Jonathan, I'm going to ask you about partnerships in conjunction with cloud. So if you look at Microsoft, and firstly, I want to get a view from you on, as people go down the cloud journey, what should they be thinking about? But partnerships are critical, right? Because where you go to market is the technology. I suspect there's other players that come in. If, say Julie is looking to go to the cloud, there will be system integrators, there will be, the guide wires of the world, people that provide specific capabilities for the insurance industry. How do you think about partnerships, and how do you think about the value that they provide? And also, please do give us advice as to our listeners, and as they think about their cloud journey, what they should be thinking about.
Sure. So from a Microsoft perspective, we're a very large partner organization, right? We work with partners across the board. So you mentioned Guidewire, for example. So Guidewire, Duck Creek, Majesco, Sapiens, Instec, Insurity, EIS. I could just start rattling them off, right? Because they all have cloud solutions. Now, what's interesting is some partners are taking their solutions and they're just moving them to cloud. Others are looking at them and saying, are they cloud native solutions? How can we upgrade them and modernize our solutions so that they can better work with cloud services, take advantage of artificial intelligence and other cognitive services? Now, the key here is to make sure that, from a Microsoft perspective, we have managed partners, right? These are the partners in our industry that we believe are key to, helping our customers to transform. So we work with our partners very closely. They get partner managers, they get technology architects that work with them to help to analyze their systems and make them more cloud enabled, right? Because to something Julie said earlier, it's about value, right? You don't move a system to the cloud if you're not going to get the same value or better value out of it being there. So, when I think about customers moving to the cloud, I think they really have to plan for it, right? What applications do you have that you want to migrate? What applications do you want to modernize and then migrate? If you're going to sunset an application, why move it to cloud? Right? Sunset it on-prem and then have, the new upgraded, more modernized solution working in the cloud. Now, 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, when I spoke to customers, they didn't want to move to the cloud. Right? A couple of years later, it was, can you tell me how to move to the cloud in a safe and compliant way? Right? And they would ask me a number of questions. And, what I think that boils down to is, why should we trust our systems and our data and our customers' data, in the cloud? And I think it comes down to providing support, making sure that you're lowering your costs, improving your performance. I think it's really important to understand that value and the alignment of priorities. We talked about priorities, right? So for me, it's really important that I understand, for example, Julie's priorities, and that her priorities align with our priorities as well. And, one great example of value is the risk workload. So a number of years ago, we did some tests, right? And we estimated that if we gave the world's population a life insurance policy for $100,000 and ran a stochastic model, right, with 10,000 inner loops, 1,000 outer loops, and we did it on a single core, it would take 600 years for the results to come back. So basically, Genghis Khan could have hit enter, right, and maybe getting the results right now. We actually tested it on 50,000 core, and we got the results back in under an hour, right? So the key here is to understand that models that used to run weeks or months can now be run in, hours or minutes. And the one caution about the cloud that I would give everybody is, if you give an actuary access to unlimited compute capacity, they're going to use it.
Consume it.
Yeah. So it's really important to manage it from a value perspective, right? And I think that's the key for any technology that you're going to use to enable a solution. What is the value proposition?
Fair enough. Fair enough. Julie, I know you are at the beginning of your cloud journey at Chubb. And, we talked a little bit about why you went down that path. Again, I'd love to get your views. And I think Jonathan articulated it brilliantly. Value, right? So, but beyond customer first and beyond defining, because, I know that the three of you are going to say that. Otherwise, if I say why, you say customer first. I'd love to get something beyond that. But what is the driver? And how do you actually define that threshold of value? Because it's clear you can do anything on the cloud and you can stand up. It's so easy to stand up compute, but at some point the cost value equation starts to just not make sense. So what is your thinking as you go down this journey?
Yeah, and I would say our cloud journey is not it's mature in some areas, and in some areas it's emerging. So when we talk about things like data and use of data and our data lakes and our data platforms, those are cloud enabled and have been cloud enabled for a while. That was our first place to go, and that is obvious as to why. Large amounts of data that we need for analytics or actuarial models or for operational KPI reporting just made sense, and was an easy justification when you go back 5 years ago or even 3 years ago, when I think insurance was a little bit later to accept that we could run workloads safely in the cloud or infrastructure as a service sort of capabilities. That was much easier to accept, because otherwise we were in the Genghis Khan sort of situation. We couldn't actually deliver the value that we were being asked to deliver. We accelerated our cloud journey when we started to build our digital workloads for some of the capabilities that I talked about. So we have a fair amount of, that was the next sort of layer. How do we approach those front end consumer-oriented, external-facing capabilities, and how do we approach those workloads and automation, certainly in the cloud. The ability to get deliverables to market quickly. If every time you want to do a new digital product or a new product and you have to build physical infrastructure, 4 times over for environments, there's an easy business case that says we need to go. So we need a cloud capability. And now we're really down the path where Jonathan talks about, now how do we take a very large legacy-driven estate and think about prioritizing what goes, what gets sunset, what actually can run in a hybrid environment. So we're working that roadmap, which I sort of call the middle. So we did the front, and we did the the data side, the back. I don't want to call data back because we just said it's so strategic. But this and this, now we're in the middle of the sandwich, which is a lot of hard work in terms of actually thinking about how you prioritize and why go, and what's the value. Certainly, I think others have learned, if you just go for a pure cost play, you're going to be disappointed.
And interestingly, again, you and I had conversations as we were moving to virtual earlier this year, and one of the things I've seen with my customers, at least across the insurance industry, and Sanjay, I suspect you've seen this beyond, is that customers that had some portion of their workloads on the cloud actually managed, their businesses were more resilient. They were able to flip to things like work from home or a virtual workforce much more easily. So I suspect that is also one driver. But Sanjay, I'm going to throw a completely different question to you, and this really should have been for Julie, but given that, financial services, we're a very regulated industry. Insurance is a regulated industry. Banking is a regulated industry. How do you and what do you hear from regulators, and how do you actually deal with those kinds of questions as you go down the digital journey?
I think, Sasha, I'll answer your question this way, and I'll connect it to your previous question on cloud as well. I think what we're finding is a journey on two sides. I think increasingly carriers, corporations, institutions are putting together business logic and demonstrating that these are secure, capable capabilities upon which they can deliver better functionality. And so there's a progression there. I think regulators also are starting to understand that that's the reality of the world. We're all experiencing this in our previous lives. And so I think there's a convergence coming, which is dissimilar to where we were, let's say, 3 years ago. And I think that's changing very fast. Part of what's behind that is, when we talk about cloud, and I'll take that as an example, our first thought is always around cloud means that we'll take our existing infrastructure and move it to the cloud. Right. But I actually think that, we want to expand that perspective and think, and I'll give you a framework that we use, which is 4 different components to it, which obviously the first one is take what you have, virtualize it, what I call lift and shift it to the cloud, hopefully get better economics, single pane of management, more resiliency to the point I think, Sasha, you were making, and go forward with that. And that's a journey, and that's an important journey, but it's only one of 4 journeys. I think the second journey that's embedded in much of the discussion we've had so far is this notion of software as a service. Now, we may not be thinking of buying a SaaS product from an AWS or a Microsoft or a GCP, but they are OEMing the cloud infrastructure upon which they're delivering the capability. And we think of them as software as a service. But the fact they are cloud enabled, that they're built on a cloud backbone, makes them evergreen. We don't have to do all of those version upgrades all the time and the work that goes in. That allows for new capability to introduce very fast, to the point you made about the resilience and reacting to sort of the pandemic. And so SaaS is a second component. And I think, any CIO I speak with on cloud, I sort of expand and help them think through, all of the other elements. The third element, and Julie brought this up, and it came through on your poll as well, Sasha, is data, right? So the notion is, many years ago, we separated, computer architectures logically to have storage separate from compute. And obviously that's fueled all this growth in compute and elastic compute over the cloud. But what that's also done is logically separating the data has allowed us to pull it together in a way that we can apply that amazing compute on it. And so we have new capabilities now. It used to be that we started with a hypothesis and then we were going to test that through analytics. Today, we have capabilities that basically do hypothesis generations. We just throw a bunch of data at it and then say, what are the questions I should be asking? I don't even know to ask the question. Can you find the questions that are relevant for me to be looking at? And so those are capabilities that you can only get on the back of a compute engine and a cloud backplane. And so data-based is the third one. And then we get to the fourth one, which is really this, what I call recomposing current applications. And I think it's really powerful because it's not about just moving it to the cloud. It's about using new capabilities that are now available in the cloud and joining them to your ecosystem point to deliver better capability. So, you think about cognitive and the way we actually do in the front desk, respond to claims adjustments, being able to read the emails, ingest, classify, categorize, and actually automatically respond, changes the game completely. The way we think about call centers and incoming calls coming in, when you recompose it, you can add not only a cloud-based call center capability, but things like transcribe. So it's automatically listening to the conversation and transcribing it down. It's actually translating it from multiple languages into English. It's actually taking that and doing semantic analytics on it. It's actually extracting, the key questions and putting it in a database and giving you the answers around that. And that isn't about modernizing what you did. It's about actually covering a much larger footprint than the original application did. So you think about those 4 components, and they're all coming together in very meaningful ways to sort of fuel what we see as cloud. It isn't just the lift and shift. It's the data moving to the cloud and the ability it creates. It's actually the recomposing of architecture, so it gives us more. And then it's obviously a lot around the SaaS components there. So that's what I would say. I think regulators are following that, and I think that we started this journey some time back, and the time we started the journey, most of our clients told us that we would never move to the cloud, and lo and behold, we're here today, and it's an entirely different discussion.
Yeah, fair enough. So, Julie, this is and I'm paraphrasing a few questions that have come up. So there's 2 big themes, which it sounds like a lot of our listeners would love to hear from you. One is almost how do you prioritize? And there's various ways you can think about prioritization, customer experience, growth, cost. How do you prioritize that? How do you prioritize which technologies do you go after? Some of those kinds of themes. And then there's another one on measuring outcomes. And I think you talked about this, which is be clear when you're investing in something that you measure the outcome. And again, it's that cost value equation. So both are fairly similar. I'd love to get your views on both those dimensions.
Sure. I'll start with the prioritization one first, Asha. I'll sort of talk about our digital automation journey as opposed to sort of the digital distribution or digital partnerships. And we actually did work up front to look globally at all of our level 1 and 2 processes and how much effort, time, people, cost was associated with those processes. And when I talked about, sort of a top-down approach to the pro forma of how we were going to approach that, we went after the big ones first. But we made sure, and we continue to make sure, that we have a fair amount of our pie that's related to investment in the newer things like extraction, like sentiment analysis, those capabilities, and how do we build those for the future. So there's that view while we work on just the block and tackling in a very systematic approach. I mean, if you have 20% of your employee base working on this type of activity, the business case becomes a no-brainer. I will say that we build our business case at an enterprise level, and then we implement at a regional or business or process level. So if you say, how do I make sure that changes get processed straight through, then we approach that roadmap, and it's mapped out for multiple years on where we will go next. That helps us also with the technology, because while we don't have, 54 countries figuring out which technology they're going to use and, how they're going to do it, it's a fairly top-down approach in terms of technology choices or capability approach. But then the last thing I'll say around this topic is, once you prioritize those things, making sure that you empower the local business owners, process owners, regional country leadership to own those and take hold of those within those broader enterprise frameworks. Measurement is where we measure the percent that's straight through processed. We measure the exceptions. We measure, if the percent of exceptions is high, where can we again then take advantage of data and machine learning to go back at those processes the second time. You've heard me say a couple of times a sweep approach. Get experience with it, build the back end capability with people and process and change management, and then sweep it again. And then sweep it again with more robust machine learning around those things. But, a set of simple metrics around, whether it's digital adoption metrics or internally, whether it's percentage of, our activities that go straight through. The business case in terms of outcome, we do push hard on CBAs around, as you've been.
Yes, I've been on the end of that, on the other.
But it's more of an approach to make sure that our focus stays very attuned, to the prize. I use an analogy inside Chubb of, we are not about slicing the sausage in thin slices. We're going after the whole thing. So we don't really accept those little slices with the cheese and crackers.
Okay, so no cheese and crackers for Chubb when we come to you with an idea, Julie. We're coming to the end of our time. So what I would love is if we could just do a minute from all three of you on just last thoughts, last bits of advice as folks embark on their digital first or their digital transformation journey. Sanjay, should we start with you?
First off, Julie's and Jonathan's comments are fantastic. And it's just been great to see, Julie, you sort of lead the initiative at Chubb and how far ahead you've come. So kudos to you and a tip of the hat there. Look, I think the advice I would give myself, our team, and across the world to peers would be the following. Start with the business end objective first. This is not a technology journey. This is a business journey, and it happens to be enabled by digital. And I think, put as much focus on the people piece, the process piece, and the data piece before you get to the technology piece. And, I just think that the purposeful orchestration of those four components is the key to success in delivering better digital outcomes. And so that's probably the one thing I would leave you with.
Jonathan?
So I'm going to kind of agree. I think it's about business outcomes. I think we've been on a journey for years. We talk about technology as a disruptor. I'd like to disagree with that. If we think about it, we started with mainframes, we moved to client server, and now we've got cloud and insurtech, right? This is an evolution. Let's embrace it. But to Sanjay's point, make sure you're getting value out of your investment.
Fair enough. Julie?
I think I would just add the focus on people as much as process and technology is key. The skills needed for future, the excitement that can be brought into an organization around the opportunity to do new things and to be part of the journey. Technology, we've emphasized a lot today that, this is not a technology project. So or a technology problem. I am going to pivot a little back to having good technologists embedded in your teams is absolutely critical to the success of the program. So a shout out to my technology side of the house today, if they're listening.
Wonderful. Clearly we could have gone on forever. We didn't even get to touching the future of work other than, very peripherally. We barely talked about data, but clearly there was enough to talk about with digital. So what's interesting to me is in all the conversation about digital, I think pretty much all of you, and Julie, other than you right at the end, who said, yes, technologists are critical. We have talked so much about business transformation first, not technology first. We've talked about customer first, not digital first. So it seems to be the way for us to actually to move forward in our digital journey is to keep those two or three things in mind. So it's clearly very, very critical for us to keep that in mind. Measuring outcomes, I think that's clearly something we've talked about. Julie, I love the whole idea of global decisions and then, local empowerment. So, decide what you're going to do. But again, it goes back to your technology has to be decided, your outcomes have to be decided, your customer experience has to be decided, and then you enable people. But thank you all for all your insights. I truly appreciate you taking the time. It was a lot of fun, and I think I've walked away with a bunch of things, and I know I will make sure that we implement, Julie, especially when we come to you with ideas, but to all of our other clients as well. But thank you, Jonathan, Julie, Sanjay, and have a fantastic day.